Brooke used to have a problem sleepwalking. She would love if she knew she could just sleep and stay asleep in bed, but unfortunately she sleepwalked and did very strange things while sleepwalking. One night Brooke got out of bed and walked down her stairs and down to the basement and did ironing while all in her sleep. Another night Brooke was driving for a few miles all in her sleep. Brooke was very lucky to have not have crashed her car. The thing is with sleepwalking is you should never wake anyone up from sleepwalking, because if you do, they will more than likely suffer confusion arousal. You might put them in more danger if you do wake them up. One night Brooke got up and while asleep walked down her road and into a local construction site. There was a crane and she climbed up the crane, a whole 150 feet high in the air. Brooke walked over the top of the crane while asleep and stood on the edge of it. Thankfully a policeman drove along and spotted her. He had guessed it was Brooke as he knew about her before from other incidents. He knew that if he called out to her, she would suffer from confusion arousal and more than likely would fall as a result. He didn't know what else to do but to call her mom. Lucky Brooke had her phone on her with her pyjamas, which her mom knew she used to do, just in case they couldn't find her after sleepwalking. Her mom rang, and because of her ringtone registering with her as something she knew and her mom's voice, she quickly woke up and thankfully she lived to tell the tale. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Joe was out trick-or-treating with his friends and two brothers and sisters. They went out trick-or-treating in the daytime and kept going until it was dark. Joe wanted to have a Halloween party, but his dad wouldn't allow him, so himself and his two sisters and brothers had their own party in the kitchen table. When they went home, they were showing their dad all of the candy they received. Joe's dad, Jack, gave each of his children a candy-coated apple and wished them a happy Halloween. Joe ate his apple and the rest didn't get a chance because they were so full. It was getting late and suddenly Joe felt sick. The ambulance was called and unfortunately Joe died hours later. Joe's autopsy had showed results of cyanide poison and later were found in the apples that the rest of the family didn't eat. It was later revealed that Joe's dad, Jack, had purposely given his 5 children poison after taking out a life insurance policy on each one. That was a sick plan for having money problems. Thankfully, the rest of his children didn't eat the poison. Jack was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Ireland is full of ghost stories, and one of the most famous of them all is the story of a ghost who returned to the living world with the sole intention of righting a wrong. What makes this ghost story so famous and memorable is because James Haddock was acknowledged and celebrated by the Bishop of the time, Dr. Jeremy Taylor. This gave the story a very strong foundation to be passed down through the years as an Irish ghost story. James Haddock was a farmer who lived outside of Belfast. James died in the year 1657, but after his death, his spirit had returned to the land of the living to avenge those who did him wrong. James Haddock had made a will that those who should inherit his manor house and farm were his wife Arminel, his young son John Haddock was to receive the rest of it once he reached the age of 21. Mr. Davis was the name of the executor of James's will. Davis married James's wife Arminel a few years after James's death. It was the start of the reason for James's spirit to start his haunting, as after James's death, Mr. Davis changed James's will where he put his own son as the beneficiary instead of John Haddock, who was the rightful heir. Davis would have got his own way only for the haunting of James Haddock. It started one night during September. James's friend Francis Taverner was on his way home to Hilborough. Nothing was out of the ordinary until suddenly his horse stopped on the Drumbridge near Brumbeg. Taverner wondered what was wrong, but didn't think much of it, so just got off his horse and led him across the bridge. Suddenly he got a start when he saw a figure in a white coat appear right in front of him. Francis couldn't believe his eyes, because the white figure in front of him looked exactly like his friend James Haddock, who had passed away 5 years before. Francis was shocked to the core when the ghostly figure begged him to make sure his son was the rightful owner of the land that was due to him. Francis refused and jumped on his horse and raced away like a racehorse. Francis heard a very strong wind and screeches almost like a banshee when all of this was happening. Francis was happy to arrive home, and as soon as he did, he fell down on his knees and prayed to God to protect him from whatever he just saw. The next night, Francis still wasn't over the shock of seeing his friend's ghost when he suddenly saw him again. As he was sitting by the fire with his wife, he was disappointed his wife could not see the ghost, and wondered why. James Haddock begged and pleaded with Francis that he has to go to his wife to persuade her to make sure his son gets what is due to him and what is rightfully his. He begged for him to make sure justice was done and to right the wrong. Francis once again refused to offer any help, and due to it, he was visited by James Haddock's ghost every single night for a month. Francis was in a very bad place and knew he had to get away from it all, so he fled to Belfast. But to his horror, the ghost had followed him. He didn't know what to do. The ghost was getting more and more aggressive and was now demanding Francis go back to Arminel and punish her in the worst way for her terrible treatment of their son John. Francis was shocked and scared more than ever, as the ghost warned him that if he didn't do what he was told, there would be extreme measures taken. Francis Taverner knew he had to confide in someone and couldn't think of anyone else to go to for help besides his local chaplain. Francis explained the whole story from the very first time he saw the ghost on the bridge to the night before. When the chaplain was told not long after he had the whole story, He then went to visit Dr. Lewis Downes, who was the vicar of Belfast at the time. The three men went to see Davis to explain the ghost's message and demand. Davis laughed at the men as if he was just told a very funny joke. He refused to make any change to the will and refused to give up any land. After none of what was done so far worked, the ghost of James Haddock had told Francis Taverner to take the matter to court. Francis knew that this would be farcical because 1, they would laugh at the idea of a ghost, and 2, there was no witness. The ghost must have known Francis's worry, as he said, "Don't worry about them not believing you, for I will appear myself in the court. When you are the judge or whoever calls upon me, I shall appear." The court was held in Carrickfergus, and it was under the title, "The Court Case," to return the estate to John Haddock. The opposing counsel mocked and jeered the idea and began to call for James's ghost to appear. He started shouting in a mocking tone, "James Haddock! James Haddock! James Haddock!" On the third mention of James's name, he received a ghostly, creepy, out-of-this-world response. Reports circulated that then, in that very moment, there was a huge clap of thunder, and the courtroom shook as if there was an earthquake. And to make matters worse, a hand appeared in the witness box, and a voice from beyond this world asked, "Is this enough?" After that, the court case was settled almost immediately. Davis left the courthouse, where crowds of onlookers shouted abuse at him. He just wanted to go home, but he never did get home. The reason Davis never reached home is because as he was riding home, he was thrown violently from his horse and broke his neck. It was after this day Francis Taverner never saw the ghost of James Haddock again. The tale of the ghost and everything that came with it was the talk of the town and reached all corners of Ireland. It was then that Bishop Jeremy Taylor put it in writing that the ghost was true. The bishop said that James Haddock's ghost was the only ghost who ever answered a summons in the court of law. James Haddock was buried in Drunbeg Parish church courtyard in the 17th century. It is said throughout history that his tombstone will never ever stand up straight. Even when it is moved upright, it just falls over. To this day it lies in moss and dirt. Is the reason the tombstone doesn't stand upright a message from James? Is he trying to tell us something?
Of all the money that e'er I spent it
One of the most wretched haunted house stories is from the year 1912. And what makes the story so wretched is that the story is true. On June 10th, 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore were stabbed to death inside of their home in Villisca, Iowa. It was just like any night, and both Sarah and Josiah were in the house with their 4 children and 2 friends who were spending the night. Unfortunately, they were all killed. To this day, the crime remains a mystery. Nobody really knows who killed them, what killed them, and why. Were they just a random target, or was there some reason? No matter what reason, there was no justifying the horrible murders that took place inside the Moore home on that horrifying night back in June 10th, 1912. The Moore's home is considered to be one of the most haunted houses in the United States of America. But just like most paranormal experiences that happened in certain places and murders and hauntings, there are always certain people drawn to them places. People pay $400 to stay for one night inside the Moore home. There have been paranormal tours, but they have been cut short by children's voices, falling lamps, moving ladders, and flying objects, says the Villisca Axe Murder House website. One of the worst events that had happened in the house since the murders was when a paranormal investigator stabbed himself after spending the night. As the Villisca Axe Murder House website states, skeptics have left believers. I had a long day and even longer night, and was so tired getting home. I knew that my husband would be fast asleep when I got home. I crept upstairs quietly and got dressed for bed, then crept in, not to wake my husband. I was just about to go to sleep when I heard something. I thought it was my husband up and about, but then I knew it wasn't, as I could hear his snoring. Thankfully, my husband didn't snore loud, but I could hear his faint snoring, which told me he was definitely asleep. I had no pets, so it couldn't have been a cat or a dog. I froze in my bed when I heard another noise. This time, it was in my room. I didn't move and opened my eyes just a fraction. I could see a dark figure across my room wearing a ski mask. The figure was over by my jewellery. My heart thumped in my chest and I felt like screaming, but didn't want to advertise I was here. I knew, of course, whoever it was had seen me, but I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep, hoping they would leave and I could wake my husband and lock the door and call the police. I didn't want them to know I was awake for fear of some altercation where anything could happen. Whoever was in the room, it could be a crazy man or woman, they could be a serial killer or just some crazy addict. All these crazy thoughts ran through my mind as my heart beat faster and faster as I felt sweat fall from my brow onto my cheek. I continued to be asleep. I could hear footsteps on my carpet, but couldn't figure out which part of my room they were coming from. Suddenly, they stopped. I listened intently for more movement, but heard none. I hoped and prayed whoever was in my room were making their way downstairs now and would leave my house immediately. But I froze in fear when I heard a sinister voice in my ear say, "I know you're awake." Hello. This story is about a 7-year-old boy that was playing a game of chess with not another human, but a robot. It's a true story that took place in a Russian chess open in 2021. The game gathered a lot of interest with the boy playing a robot. The game had a lot of spectators watching and enjoying the game, until something very frightening happened. The boy rushed the robot in a certain move, and the robot did not like to be rushed, as it needed time to choose a move. It apparently had mistaken the boy's finger for a chess piece and broke his fingers. By the time the crowd could grab the robot off the boy's hand, his fingers had already been fractured. The boy continued to play the game with his hand in a sling. The management said that the robot was given to them by a loan, and they had no control over it. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content.